When we want to talk about nutrition, we want to talk about what God said, not what man has said, because man has never spoken a whole lot of anything that was worth listening to. We know that the human heart is wicked, it's deceitful, nobody understands it. So if we want to go for the ultimate source of truth, let's go to the only heart that knows what truth is, and that's of the Lord. And let's see what God has said about nutrition. Because who made the body? God made the body. Who better to tell us what to put in it? Genesis 1:29, we're told, "Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree yielding seed, and to you it shall be for meat." And I failed to find within the punctuation marks of that text anything about animal products. But yet this is what God has said. But if you go to the world today for nutrition, they will tell you a completely different story. God talks about utilizing His power. They want to use the power of the pyramid. I know this isn't the New Age pyramid power, but in some respects the deceit and the deception is nearly as strong. They want to take the cereals and put them on the bottom, and I don't have a problem with that, although I might maybe take my fruits and vegetables and put them on the bottom down there and expand those somewhat more, and maybe put my breads and cereals up a little higher where they're a little smaller. But my milk and my yogurt and my cheese, meat, all that kind of thing up there, the extras up on top there, like they're some sort of a decoration. This thing has nutrition all upside down. And if you want to follow this guide, I do not see how you could be following a prescription to perfect health. But this is what man is telling us is the thing to do. I got this from a dietitian from our local county health agency. And this is what they're teaching people. And our government, this is an extension of our county, and this is a service of our county to help people to know more about better health. This is what they're sending out for everybody to know. Have you ever looked to see, these are the same kind of things. This is a little different than when we went to school. When I was in high school they had a little different pyramid than they do now. They've finally gotten a little more intelligence relative to nutrition in the human body than they did, but it's still the same thing. There were posters on the walls in the schools telling us what we ought to eat. The government, because it was state education, was telling everybody this is the thing to do, and we all said, well, if the government knows best, then we'll follow the government. We were being led down a path that I don't appreciate to be led on, because I'm going to see if we can actually get a close-up here of the bottom of where that comes from. You can see on the very bottom, that says the Dairy Council of Wisconsin. I would think it to be a little interesting if a particular automobile manufacturer was able to come up with the transportation code for America and put it out, and it maybe said Ford Motor Company on all of them, somebody would be saying unfair. Well, God is saying unfair, and He'd like to say unfair through His servants. But we need to understand a little bit of some of these myths of nutrition. We feel that in the United States that we have one of the most premier medical delivery systems. We've got one of the greatest things going. We have all the technology, or we did. You travel around the world, you begin to think we're starting to get somewhere in the third world in comparison to some of the countries. But we have always felt like we have it all, we have it made, we are the ones who are number one, we have the greatest educational systems, etc., etc. Well, we are number one in some respects. You ever heard of the China study? This is an interesting study done in China a number of years ago. And they begin to do comparisons on various types of diseases and dietary practices relative to China and the more industrialized western part of the world. In the United States, we have 67 out of every 100,000 adult males dying of heart disease. Okay, that's not a real significant number, is it? I mean, it's only 67 people, and I don't know any of them. I mean, they probably live across the state. Maybe they don't even live in the state. But compare that with China with only 4. Well, I didn't know China had anything as far as good medical services over there. I mean, you have a heart attack in China, you might not even be within 6 days of a hospital. In women, the ratio is 3 to 19. 3 Chinese to 19 Americans. Breast cancer rate, 5 times higher in the U.S. versus China. Maybe we better move to China fast if you want to live very long. Cancer of the cervix, 8 times higher in American women than Chinese women. This study began in 1983. They studied 6,000 Chinese adults to find the answers to some of the questions that we had. We began to learn some things. The average Chinese has less than 15% of their total calories from fat. Americans average around 40% of their calories from fat. You know, I was in Japan a couple of years ago, and I was really impressed. Everywhere I went, nice, neat, trim little people. Now, I was sort of an unusual person because I was so tall. The only people that we ever saw that were overweight in Japan were American tourists. And I have a friend who lived in Japan for 4.5 years, and she brought groups of people from Japan to the United States to go to Disney World to tour. And she was rather embarrassed for the Japanese to ask her why we Americans look the way we do, because they were very curious as to what's wrong with you Americans. What's wrong with is what we're eating. It's not where we came from. It's not particularly our race, because we're kind of an amalgamation of everything and anything. When I go to Europe, I don't really fit in anywhere because I don't look like anybody, because I'm an amalgamation of about everything from over there. Blood cholesterol levels in the Chinese average 127 milligrams per deciliter, and Americans average 212 milligrams per deciliter. Americans get 70% of their protein from animal sources. The Chinese get 4% of their protein from animal sources. We probably all know where they're getting most of their protein from. The highest rates of heart disease, cancer, and diabetes among those in the Chinese that we did find some disease in, when we began to get the information off the questionnaires, discovered that these were the people who had found ways to get animal protein into their diet. Direct causal relationship. Chinese eat 300% more dietary fiber than Americans. We're told that we need between 800 and 1,000 milligrams of calcium every day in our diet by our American Dietetics Association. Chinese get less than half of that per day. They have hardly ever heard of osteoporosis. We have 85% of the world's osteoporosis in the United States, and the majority of the other 15% is in Western Europe. And again, that's where we all learned how to eat, was from over there. Nearly all of the calcium that the Chinese get is from their leafy green vegetables, their legumes, and their grains. Chinese consume more calories than Americans, but Americans are at least 25% heavier. Something's really out of kilter here. But the Chinese diet is plant-based and contains, less than 1/3 of the amount of fat that the American diet does. The people eat very little meat, have very little exposure to, cheese or eggs or milk, but yet iron deficiency anemia is almost unheard of in China. The Chinese diet contains 70% more vitamin C than the American diet. Some very interesting statistics. Made me want to think about it for just a little bit. I began to think about asking myself some questions when I began to hear these type of statistics. Recently, they came out with a study that said we have disproved the China Study diet program. And this was in the newspapers and the magazines, and the doctors are going, well, see, it doesn't make any difference. You can eat your fats, you can do this and whatever. I have a friend who's a medical expert who said, well, I want to know, how long did the China study last? Oh, that was a study that was conducted over a course of, years. This new study that disproved it from the United States was a course conducted over 6 weeks. They didn't tell us that. They had, that had to be dug out. But that is how Satan is using men to lie to men. Let's not believe all of this garbage. God put good things in vegetables and fruits to help us stay healthy. Have you heard of phytochemicals? Phyto isn't a dog. First time I talked about phytochemicals, I got funny looks from people, and I began to wonder if they weren't thinking about things for warfare, chemical warfare. But phyto is the Greek word for plant. These are the chemicals found in plants. These are non-nutritive chemicals. They aren't vitamins, they aren't minerals, they aren't carbohydrates or proteins or any of these types of things. These are things that we find in our foods that help to prevent disease if we're eating the Genesis 1:29 diet. Didn't God tell us that He wanted us to prosper and be in health? Didn't Jesus say that I have come that you might have life and have life more abundantly? Let's talk a little bit about what we have in our foods. Now, these are not, this is a very small list of what's really out there. And this is a new study. People don't even really yet understand. Biochemistry is now only beginning to tap into the resources and understanding what is really in food for us in the vegetable kingdom. Sulforaphane, found in broccoli. I call those the garbage man in the body. Goes around, opens up the cells, takes out the junk, puts it in a little container, and out through the urine. It's gone. Wouldn't a husband be a hero if his wife said, honey, would you please take the garbage out right now? And he said, yes. That's what broccoli does for you. You eat it, and it very meekly and obediently goes in and starts cleaning garbage out of your system. All the carcinogens zoom on out. Your p-coumaric acid and your chlorogenic acid found in tomatoes and your pineapple, strawberries, and green peppers, they prevent carcinogenic compounds from forming. When you ingest certain types of protein molecules, there are sometimes, if you have nitrates in your blood that you will take in from other foods, those nitrates like to form with other compounds and turn into nitrosamines. They get into some of your amino acids, your amines, and they make a marriage and they make bad children. They make nitrosamines, which are highly carcinogenic. Both the p-coumaric and chlorogenic acid prevents this formation, prevents this marriage, and we have no illegitimate children to poison us off with. Isoflavones, soybeans and beans. This does two things. It blocks the entry of estrogen into cells, reducing the risk of ovarian and breast cancers. But these are anti-angiogenics. These anti-angiogenics do something marvelous. In the cancer program that I work with people, we use the isoflavone genistein from the soybeans in a concentrated form. And what it does is when cancer cells group together and they say, you know, there's enough of us around here, you know, we do this as Christians, there's enough of us Adventists around here, let's form a church. They say, there's enough of us around here, let's form a tumor. But they said, we got to have some sort of means of support. We need a blood supply. Well, they'll send out an electrobiochemical impulse to a nearby capillary or vein or whatever, and boom, they'll knock a hole in the side of it, and they'll begin to form a little transportation device or another little capillary or another little arterial passageway or something over there to feed a blood supply, to feed nourishment to the tumor. This isoflavone prevents that from happening. It blocks that little burst from being effective enough to damage that membrane of that capillary and allowing those cells to form over and actually form a tubule over. It's like a shield, protect against the fiery darts of the enemy. We need some spiritual isoflavones, don't we? Get those in our diet of study, can't we? Flavonoids. You get those in your citrus fruits and your berries. They keep cancer-causing hormones from latching onto a cell. Especially your citrus fruits. They go up and protect your eyes. People who have enough citrus fruits in their diet don't get cataracts by and large because they protect your eyes from the cells in your eyes from the sunshine, the harmful rays. Of course, your allic sulfides found in your garlic and your onions and leeks, chives, shallots. I just learned how to eat shallots in France a couple of weeks ago. I really like those. And they also help to they bring the carcinogenics and help them to be more easily excreted out of the body.
Can I see that back?
You want that back? Okay, we'll put that back for just a second. Although when you get done, I'm going to show you how you're going to all own some of these. I am here to equip the saints. I'm not here just to impress you with all this great stuff, folks. I'm here to equip the saints. Now, I've studied into this somewhat, and so I know some about the background of this kind of thing, but you can go home with a tape of this, with your own copies of these things, and you can go out and start a vegetarian cooking school and impress all the people who come with how knowledgeable you are. And don't start getting the shivers of being afraid of it, because every one of you is going to be able to do this when you walk out of here. I'm timid. I don't like to be up front. I'm scared to death of people. I'm a mountain man. I'd just as soon go back and hide in the hills and not see anybody till Jesus comes, but the Holy Spirit won't let me do that. Your fruits and your vegetables contain a lot of antioxidants and phytochemicals as well. You notice all of your kale, broccoli, cabbage, all these greens lower the estrogen in your blood and lower your opportunity for breast cancers. Your isothiocyanates in your cruciferous vegetables, like your broccoli and cauliflower and those. See what they do? They block your carcinogens. I mean, somebody who eats all of these wonderful things shouldn't have to fear of getting cancer. Now, I understand that we do have some genetic weaknesses that are passed on from generation to generation. But friends, if we'll follow God's health plan and eating all these things that we're supposed to be eating, our chances are going to be dramatically reduced. Glucuric acid found in your oranges and your spinach and your apples and your carrots helps your body to cleanse out the cancer-causing chemicals.
Are we talking about raw?
Raw is much better than any other way. That's why I tell people, eat as much stuff as you can raw. Be a rabbit. How do you think rabbits hop around so fast? How do you think rabbits are so fertile and so prolific? They eat all their veggies raw. Now, I understand that we live, especially where I live, I can't always have everything raw. We have several months without sunshine in the winter, and it's tough. So things that are dried are probably close to raw to some extent. Things that are frozen are probably next in priority. And then things that are canned are getting down there just a little bit. But still, any and all of these are going to be a whole lot better than if you're going to be eating processed food that comes in cans and boxes in a supermarket. If you just once went to a cannery and watched how they do their processing, I think it would help you be very highly motivated to buy yourself some canning jars in a freezer or something. We know there's two different types of vegetarians. We have the strict vegetarian or a vegan. Vegan, no animal foods are eaten at all. A lacto-ovo-vegetarian, people that feel comfortable with eating milk and cheese and all that type of thing. And then we have the ovo-lacto-vegetarian who feels that animal proteins like eggs and dairy products, no meat, fish, or poultry. But you know, a lot of the people in the world think that vegetarians still eat fish. And chicken. You know what I do? I ask them what bush they find chicken and fish hanging off of. I'd like to see one of those. That'd be, the seeds would be even more interesting and more in demand than Jack and the Beanstalk seeds. And the prestigious Advances in Cancer Research publication. This is a sentence that was lifted out of there. It says, at present, we have overwhelming evidence that none of the risk factors for cancer is more significant than diet and nutrition. Isaiah 58:1 again, folks. Show God's children in the other folds, and unfortunately, even in His own fold, that they're killing themselves with their foolish dietary habits. When I run into this, I discover I'm going from teaching to preaching. I have to watch this. The Senate Select Committee on Nutrition wanted an expert opinion on diet and cancer, so they got one. And this is what it was told them. Nutritional science is of a coming of age. No other field of research seems to hold better promises for the prevention and control of cancer and other illnesses, and for securing and maintaining human health. The dietary factors that lead to cancer are principally what? Meat and fat intake, exactly right. That's the Deputy Director of the National Cancer Institutes. Some soybeanie Adventist did not make that up. That comes right from the beast's mouth. Cancer, second leading cause of death. I don't know, this could get outdated. I might have to retypeset this one periodically because you never know what's going to be the leading cause of death. But, age probably is going to be one of our biggies here pretty quick, and we're discovering that estimates are that 1 out of 250 people are going to be turning up HIV positive. 500,000 deaths from cancer in 1990. 1,400 people dying of this wicked disease every day. Friends, if we had a plane crash tomorrow, and it's a 747-400, and 400 people died, and it was because of somebody's foolishness, people would have a fit in America. But we have over 3 times that many people dying every day, and not a whole lot's being said about it. One person dies every 55 seconds, a new case every 30 seconds. $20 billion. We could solve the whole world hunger crisis in about 2 days with that much money. Spent on research and still no cures with any of these conventional treatments. Well, we make too much money by not curing some of these diseases, and I know that you can't say those things with relative safety.
Are we going to give a copy of every one of those?
Well, you can have a copy of anything and everything. Serum cholesterol is much lower in vegetarians. I have people who tell me, I am convinced, my girls had an uncle, my wife's uncle, he's maintained that he was a cholesterol generator and that diet had nothing whatsoever to do with it. And we tried desperately to try and teach him another way. But he said it had nothing to do with it and died. 1/3 risk of developing heart disease. You know, heart disease runs in my family so rampant on my father's side. All the men in that family have died of heart disease by the age of less than 60 for generations. My brother is 15 years older than I am, and he's a tiny, somewhat heavier than I am, but he's got a bigger muscular skeletal frame than I do. I'm built more slight than he is. He used to be very heavy. And we got to talking about these things, and he became very convicted on his diet a great number of years ago, maybe even somewhat more than I was, and dropped off his extra pounds and began to get out there, and he does his exercise religiously, consistently. He's, when he runs in for a checkup, he's in better shape than most people half his age. Broke the cycle. People say, well, I can't help it. Heart disease runs in my family. Well, you know what? Speaking English runs in my family too. It's what I was taught to do. I could continue on the same way of all of my fathers, like the biblical phrase, and they all ate things that weren't good for them in excessive amounts. Less risk of cancer, less risk of high blood pressure, less obesity, lower calories, higher fiber in the diet, and of course lower triglycerides in correlation to that. You know what higher fiber in the diet does? Less bowel cancer, all those kinds of things. The additional benefits are fewer bowel problems. Colon cancer. Constantly we're hearing of colon cancer. Unfortunately, friends, even among Seventh-day Adventists. And I asked them, what did you eat? Oh, we gave up meat long ago. What did you replace it with? Well, this rubber stuff that you get from the church, this image to the beast. This indigestible spun soy protein with all the salt and colors in it. Well, friends, I understand why this stuff was originated, and that was for a crutch for people to learn how to walk again on from one diet to the other. But do people walk on crutches after they break their leg for the rest of their life? No, it's a transition to where you walk again and walk better than you did when your leg was broken. Less expensive. It's much less expensive to eat simple things. And go one time, just go through the meat section and the dairy section in a supermarket and figure out what it'd cost to eat like that. Better complexions, more energy, less allergies. You know why less allergies? You're not getting all of the hormones and antibiotics out of the foods. Many people can't even eat meat or drink milk and that type of thing because of all of these things that are coming through, passing right through the food chain. Clearer mind and sharper memory. Ellen White tells us, and I believe in Counsels and Diets and Foods, that if you want to eat these things, that you need not expect to have a productive and fruitful mind that the Holy Spirit will take residence in. She said, stop trying, forget it. You're just going to be a bozo for the rest of your life unless you change. It's less stimulating, no more bad breath from decaying rot in your stomach, and it's much quicker and easier to prepare. Let's look at some patterns. Okay, we've got San Francisco as being the tallest skyscraper here. England is our next tallest skyscraper. We have Chile down here as a country, not a food. Brazil, and then we have Mexico, and then Guatemala. And this top one, we have bowel cancer death rates. How much meat do you suppose the people in Guatemala can afford to buy? Not a whole lot. What do they have to live on down there? Pretty simple things. England, you know, the soldiers from England have always been called the beef eaters. Been sort of a colloquialism about them. Look at the second list here, the second set of skyscrapers. Exact same correlation, heart disease deaths. Perfect correlation. You could almost superimpose each one of these little skyscraper sets over top of the other. And then go down to the bottom, it's per capita meat consumption. Right on the money there. I think those are some very, very relevant statistics and ought to jar people's thinking. This is from the Journal of the National Cancer Institute and the Foreign Agriculture Circular Livestock and Meat, USDA, Washington, D.C., 1976. Man, somebody's known about this for 20 years and didn't say anything. Or if they said it, they didn't say it very loud. Well, don't we have to have milk in our diet? You see these billboards all the time. Milk is good food. Every body needs some milk. Drive behind these tanker trucks with these signs on it, and you want to just climb out on your hood and turn the valve and let it run down the freeway. Save a lot of people from dying. Milk has something for everybody. Yes, it does. Leukemia viruses. Bovine growth hormone, antibiotic residues, mad cow disease, lots of estrogen. Why? Because the cows have lots of estrogen. And they probably have more than they normally would have because we're jamming them full of other hormones to make them produce more of these things so that they'll produce more milk. We'll talk more about that later in the day when we talk about the animal diseases and how they're coming across to man. Too much protein. Too much fat. And any blood and pus is too much for me. I don't know about you. Wouldn't you just like a nice frozen pus cone? Friends, some people may say that I'm being a little crass, a little sarcastic. You get into the inner workings of any industry and you begin to get your eyes open. You find out that there is more blood and pus and milk than you can imagine. I mean, you take a cup of it, or a quart of milk, and you've got nearly the same amount of somatic cells as you have the population on the earth. And these are all cells that really are not healthy to you and me, but they are under the limit that can be passed through the milk. If they go over that, then they require that to be turned into like cheese and things. But cancer. We'll talk about that later today. Much higher incidences and cancer rates with people who are having anything to do with the dairy industry today. We have an increase in udder infections in cows today. Well, man, if you got increased udder infections, I don't know that I want anything coming out of them, do you? You know, if I've got a pussy infection on my arm, I'd just soon keep it away from the dinner table. Resistant bacterias. Hey, the super germs are reality. It's no longer something that we're going to see on a science fiction movie or a science prophecy thing that some scientist is doing. This is beginning to be a reality. And why? Is it because the doctors are shooting everybody up full of antibiotics? Maybe, to a certain extent, but they are, by and large, not the most guilty culprits in this scenario. Overwhelmingly, agriculture should take the blame for this and not the medical community. And then the consumer needs to ultimately take the blame because the consumer says, I want to continue to have low-priced food, and I don't care if the farmer makes money or not. And the poor farmer's out there saying, it's costing me almost as much to produce as I'm getting for selling it, and I've got this tremendous overhead of all these animals, all this equipment, and this monstrous farm, and all these taxes, and I can't make it. I remember when we left Wisconsin 3 years ago, that year alone they had lost 1,200 dairy families out of that state who could not make it anymore. So the big factory farms are now taking over. They're doing it on a grander scale of economy, and they are making money by shooting these cows full of hormones, using all kinds of antibiotics in the feed to prevent illnesses of any kind, and all of this stuff is coming through the milk to us. Now, everybody is constantly on all of these antibiotics, whether they realize it or not, and now we're beginning to get disease-resistant organisms. Very prevalent. Milk has been linked to Alzheimer's, breast cancer, heart disease, juvenile diabetes, adult diabetes, and somebody was crass enough to put yuck on the bottom just so that that'd be balanced columns. But you know what? Somebody got me some dairy products not so awful long ago that I didn't realize I was getting. I thought something was something else, and I got a good taste of it. And I used to be a kid on a dairy farm. I had an instant deja vu. I tasted two things instantaneously out of that hot milk that they were putting into the cereal that I was eating that I thought was soy milk and wasn't. I tasted manure, and I tasted milk house cleaner. When you've worked on a farm, you never forget those two flavors. They're part of being a farmer.
Was that milk out of the grocery store or off
It was out of a grocery store. I can guarantee that anytime someone would bring me some milk out of a store, I could taste it in every batch. Now, I won't do it because I don't want to get the stuff in my system. But I know for years that I used to have to fight that in my mind because this is, I like milk, and milk is good food, but this is really grossing me out. And I had this thing in my mind for a long time. I tried to put like chocolate powder and stuff in it as much as I could to try and cover that up. Well, what about calcium? Don't we need calcium? How are we going to get calcium if we don't eat meat and dairy products? They tell us we need anywhere from 800 to 1,000 to maybe 1,200 milligrams of calcium every day. How are we going to get enough calcium? We're going to be in big trouble if we don't get enough calcium. Because I have a little breakdown of what is in some of the foods, and I'm just going to lay this over top here and we'll slide it along. Okay, almonds are pretty high in calcium, aren't they? Well, there's only 63 milligrams there for a serving. Well, we could eat some black beans there. That'd give us, well, between the two of them, we'd have almost 200, so we're still short about 600. Well, let's go for something high here that doesn't have dairy in it. Well, we could get some more navy beans, but man, too many beans there. Well, parsley, but I can't thrive on parsley. Okay, the figs were fairly high, but there's only so many figs I can eat before I'm living in the bathroom. Well, spinach is so-so there, and I could eat some tofu, some whole wheat bread. Boy, it'd be tough to get that much calcium in a day, wouldn't it? To do that, I'm going to have to hit all these foods that are pretty high in protein.
Sesame seeds is higher than all of those.
Okay. Sesame seeds are great, but then again, they're an oil seed, and I'm going to end up with more fat in my diet than I like. You know what? There's some interesting things about calcium that we need to understand. Not always do these government figures correlate to what's good nutrition and good health. And well, let's look into this a little bit. Most people in the world have diets that contain no dairy products at all. Said before, 85% of the world's osteoporosis happens to land right in North America, between Canada and the United States. And we're the dairy people. You can find some more if you want to go to Germany and France and Switzerland. but that's going to be about the extent of it. You're not going to find the osteoporosis in South America very frequently, hardly ever. Not going to find any in the Orient. Very, very, very remarkably rare. Milk rarely consumed in pre-industrial Asian and African societies, yet they have strong bones and teeth and very little osteoporosis. Of the African Bantu women, they have no dairy in their diet at all. They have less than 400 milligrams of calcium from vegetarian sources. 1/2 the amount consumed by Western women. They breastfeed 10 babies for 10 months each, and they've never heard of osteoporosis. We better wake up. Do you know that all of this calcium in the dairy foods is not necessarily all that assimilable? And so that if you're going to get it from these sources, you've got to eat these horrendous amounts to be able to assimilate any of it. But out of your leafy green vegetables and some of these other food groups that we looked at, very, very highly assimilable. Now, it doesn't make any difference to me. Well, it does make a difference to me. Why should I have to go and process through a horrendous big pile of something to get one little thing out of the bottom if I could go to another pile and just pick it up? Why should I make my body do all that extra work? And furthermore, if all that other stuff piled all over the top of it is harmful to me, I don't want to work with it. Let's take another little look here at some of these nutrition items. Let's look at our chicken breast here. Pretty high in protein, isn't it? Okay. Pretty high in fat as well. Let's look at our eggs. There's pretty significant protein, pretty significant fat. Go to our non-fat dry milk. Our non-fat milk. It's still pretty high in fat and protein, both, either one. You know what's happening when we eat these things to get all this extra calcium? We're getting something else along with it. Fat and protein. Well, people always tell me, well, how are you going to get your protein? You got to have animal products or you won't get protein. I mean, protein's what you build people out of. You have to have it. And I mean, they look at us like, how can you exist? How can you be standing there in front of me? And how can you go to work? Because it doesn't add up. Made me think of Thoreau when he said, my neighbor told me that I couldn't be strong without eating and drinking all the things he did, but yet here his puny little frame is being jerked along by 2 very strong grass-fed oxen while he's plowing his field. He said, and it caused my mind to think. Well, it caused my mind to think a little bit too, because God designed us to be herbivores or vegetarians just as much. You got some of these a little bit mixed up here this morning, so I'll try and bring them out as we go. The amount of calcium present in the diet has little effect on the quantity of calcium that's eventually absorbed into the body. There are other factors involved. The quality of calcium and what it is combined with has everything in the world to do with whether it's absorbed into the body or not. A high-protein diet draws calcium from the bones. And we'll look into that in just a little bit. Unprocessed vegetable foods contain sufficient calcium to meet all the needs of an adult and growing children. Calcium deficiency of dietary origin is a myth and virtually unknown in humans. Very rarely have I ever talked to somebody who had a clearly established calcium deficiency. And when I talk to these people, it's always, yeah, I don't like this, and I don't like that, and I don't like this, and I don't like that. I only know of one person who really truly has a hard time actually assimilating calcium of any kind. And she can't get it from any kind of a dietary source very well. And her whole body is so scrambled up that she's just another genetic failure because of how far we are away from Adam and Eve. But that's, very, very rare cases. I want to diverge just for a second while we're here on milk, and I want to show you some things on milk. Is this going to show up okay? Okay.
Can you pull it a little to
Can you
the
pull
left?
it this way?
Pull it a bit to the side.
No, the other way?
Yeah,
More.
it's good.
Okay. How's that doing?
That's good.
Now, I'm not going to give you a commentary on every last one of these values, but this is a component comparison weighted in deciliters of human milk versus cow's milk. You know, if we're going to talk about milk, God designed mothers to give milk to their children. Most of us probably were nursed as babies. Some of us were, some of us weren't. I know all of my children were. The water component is quite similar. The protein on cow's milk versus human is significantly higher. Well, isn't that great? We need protein to grow, don't we? Well, humans are designed to reach their maturity over somewhere around, physical maturity at about 18 years of age, somewhere around there. Some people mature a little sooner, some a little slower. A calf needs to be fully mature in less than 3 years. So his body requires more protein to build much quicker. His body is designed by the Creator much differently than yours or mine is. Higher protein for a person is not a good plan. All the way from children into adulthood. We each have a threshold. And this is a very nebulous term because I don't know what this threshold is for me and I don't know what it is for you. It's very difficult to determine. But if we are to pass over the threshold of how much protein our body can deal with, and we have excess protein beyond that threshold, our body loses its ability to transport oxygen rapidly and significantly. Well, what does that factor out to be? Well, it turns us into quote-unquote meatheads. We don't think. Without oxygen in our brains, we're not very intelligent. We don't have the spiritual abilities with our antennas blunted off. It also relates to disease. Viruses are anaerobic. They do not thrive where there is oxygen. And they say, this is wonderful. No oxygen? Nice place to live. I've gone to places before and looked around and said, man, would I love to live here. Green valleys and nice mountains and nice climate and lots of water and no people. And, the old virus looks around and says, hey, this is great. Good food source. Good environment. I think I'll camp here. This is a good place to move. I'll get my family and raise another family here. That's what the virus says because it's great for him. Cancer has to have a lot of protein to grow. So you've got a triple whammy here. And for little children, that high a rate of protein is not good. You can see in studies that they have done, pediatric studies, where children who are fed on cow's milk versus human milk are larger, they are heavier, they perhaps have a heavier frame, they have more fat cells, and they mature faster, all these types of things, just like a calf would do. But if you will compare life expectancy for that person and the life quality of how healthy they will be for a given number of years, you'll find out that that was not a good idea to get that big that fast. Our fats are similar. Let me check a few more here that are magnesium. See the difference in the magnesium? That is really a dramatic difference. That amount of magnesium is what we call a calcium antagonist. It prevents the body from assimilating the calcium. That phosphorus besides causing renal failure. It demineralizes the bone by turning on what we call autoclasts. When we have to grow, you know, these calves have to grow very fast, so they have what they call autoclasts that are cruising around through the body, breaking the bone cells down so it can be rebuilt. Constantly during the entire phase of growth, we are remodeling the bones, breaking them apart, putting some more in, breaking them apart, putting some more in, and that's how they can get bigger. Because you can't just leave what you have static and add more onto it, because it's already an entire intact model mechanism. You just want it to grow bigger. Well, bones are solid. You can't just put air into them and, you know, blow them up like a balloon. Something has to happen to the structure as it grows. Turns on these osteoclasts, and if you're going to continue to do that all through your life, you're going to end up with osteoporosis. Very likely. That's why we have it. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure these things out. Notice the riboflavin, dramatic difference. The riboflavin content inhibits the uptake of some of our B vitamins, especially the B2. B2 fights viruses. Look at the difference in the vitamin A. Look at all of your what we call antioxidant levels in here are much higher in the human milk versus the cattle's milk. Linoleic acid, I missed that up there near the top. We're higher in humans, but why? Well, because it's a free radical scavenger. It keeps us healthy. That's wonderful. How hot does mother's milk get? Okay? If you heat this particular substance, it turns dangerously carcinogenic. So what do we do to cow's milk to try and kill some of the bacteria and stuff? We heat it. No wonder we have increased cancer rates. See, we've got a couple more in here that I wanted to look at. Ascorbic acid, of course, we've got more in the human, which is a free radical scavenger and helps to enhance the immune system. I think that's all. Oh, yeah, dear, the nicotinic acid. You notice which one's the highest? The human milk. Without that, we don't have proper enzyme function in the body. Cattle don't need it, and we do. This was reproduced from permission from Findlay, ALR, a publication on lactation. Originally was taken with permission from Nelson's pediatric textbook, the world premier pediatric textbook. So we didn't make that up, folks. We know that everybody needs some protein, that the meat and the dairy products and eggs are good concentrated protein sources. But very few people know where these dietary recommendations came from. We have two sources that are the underlying foundation for all of this. There was a researcher, and unfortunately I am not bringing his name into my head at the moment, but he was from Europe, and he was a widely recognized nutritionist back, I believe, in about the 1930s. And it was desirous to know what amount of protein would be good to have in the body. He happened to reside in West Germany, and so he went around and asked a large number of the very rotund, robust German people how much protein did they eat, documented it, played with the figures, and decided that was how much we should have. And because this man was so well known and so famous, no one dared question anything about it. Now he's dead and you can question him. Sometimes people will dance on your grave that wouldn't show up at your doorstep. We also know that most of this nutritional information that of more modern times has been dealing with rats. And anyone who has studied this knows that a rat at birth needs 10 times more protein than a human baby does. Now this does not seem to be apples and apples. This is more like apples and rats. Apples and oranges. The average person living in a modern society today consumes enough excess protein every day to produce mineral imbalances, especially your calcium. Well, how are we going to get any protein from our vegetable sources? Look at these foods, and these are we call calories from protein. How much of the caloric content is derived in that particular food source from its protein quantity? Soybean sprouts, 54% of its calories are derived from protein. Your soy flour, 43% derived from protein. Look at over there on the vegetable side, even 49% is your spinach and your broccoli. I had one very interesting nutritionist that I had listened to in a lecture one time who told me that there is absolutely no way that a vegetarian eating a balanced diet can help but getting enough protein. They couldn't mess it up if they tried to, if they ate enough fruits and vegetables. And I thought that was really an interesting statement coming from someone with that type of expertise. Your grains are still fairly good. You would think that all of your seeds would be higher than they are, but actually your vegetables are very, very good, especially your green vegetables who have your higher levels of calcium in them. So they're balanced quite well. Even some of your fruits are okay. Now your apple, of course, is down on the bottom, but everybody knows an apple a day keeps the doctor away. So I think that maybe a little too much protein's been the problem for a lot of people. Well, can we get a complete protein? Don't you know that amino acids you have to have all of the amino acids or you're not going to have a complete protein and you're not going to be well? I mean, your immune system's going to fall apart. I'll show you the WIC Bean Book. Who puts out WIC? Okay, that's from our government. I'm going to be showing you things from their own source. Okay, I'm going to show you right up here in the top. And I don't know, can you see this handwritten stuff on the top there? Pretty faint. I'll read it to you. This is what the nutritionist for our county shared with me. From a 2-cup serving of beans, you derive 120 calories, 8 grams of protein, a half a gram of fat, 20 grams of carbohydrates, and 9 grams of fiber. That's pretty decent. Just out of plain old beans. I have one neighbor who has been out deer hunting all fall. And these people are very, very poor right now, and I feel very sorry for that family. And I take them things from our garden and whatever periodically because they're really, really struggling to try and come up with something right now to eat. And you know what? I've got to tell him this. I've been saying this to myself and to other people, but I've got to tell it to him. If he would he hasn't found his deer yet. And the man's a good hunter. He's also a horse trainer, and he's a real mountain man, and he's over the mountains constantly. And while he was training one of our horses, he always had his rifle in a scabbard on the side of old velvet saddle there. And he's had more exposure to more deer than anybody I know because of what he's doing as an occupation, and he's never seen a buck to shoot at. But also he's had to drive here and there and everywhere to try and find a deer or a good place to find a deer to shoot at. And I sat down and I figured up the cost of the license, and I figured up the cost of just his gasoline for the 2 little trips he's taken, and the price of the ammunition that he unfortunately hasn't had a chance to shoot any of yet. Fortunate for the deer. And he could have had good nutrition, about 400% more than for all the money he's wasted on the deer that he hasn't got. This is what the WIC Bean book says inside. Gives you some different types of things, but I want to show you this picture. Will that lie flat for us? Here's how we get a complete protein without any moo, cluck, or whinny in our diet. Beans or peas plus a grain product equals a complete protein. Now, most people will say, well, to be a vegetarian, you have to be a rocket scientist to sit down with all these tables and calculators and try and figure out how to have a complete protein, and you can't make it. But this is what the nutritionists from the government sources are telling us. A bean or pea, it matters not which, plus a grain product, it matters not which, equals a complete protein. So ladies in the kitchen, just remember this very, very simple rule of thumb when you're making things so that you have a complete building block for your children, so that you have good immune systems and that you can make your strong muscles, have healthy blood. Very, very simple things. Now she just has written in here the types of beans or peas. Baked beans, kidney beans, pinto beans, black-eyed peas, which I don't care for. Split pea soup, which I loathe but eat anyway. Pinto beans I love because that's what I have in my my burritos and that type of thing. When you marry someone who lived next to Mexico for most of her life, you learn how to eat Mexican food. When we gave up the turkey for Christmas and for Thanksgiving, we developed a new tradition in our family. We eat a 100% Mexican meal for those two occasions. And there are other people who know about this who covet the opportunity to come to our house for this occasion. And they actually give you a bunch of nice little recipes in here so that you know how to cook these things properly. Let's look at a few more things. One of the things that you get out of these animal products we noticed was so much fat. Way too much fat. Here's the calories per gram of foods. Bacon is your tallest skyscraper there. I'll read these for you because they're quite small. Your T-bone steak is the next. Salami. Hamburgers. Can I make the sound where you drop down? Okay. That's brown rice, way down there. Spaghetti, sweet potatoes, white potatoes, carrots, and pumpkins. And I think if you had some of your fruits and vegetables down there, the line would be so thin you couldn't even see the thing. And what do we know about fat? It makes us fat when we eat it. It's where we get cholesterol. Do you know that if we don't eat any animal products, that we don't have to worry about cholesterol? We don't have to worry about our hardening of our arteries and getting, all of this plaque inside of our arteries, and we have these occluded arteries and you can't get any blood through, and you try to go for a walk and your heart hurts and you get dizzy and you have heart attacks and you die and you have strokes. And all these things are from fats. Take the fats out of the diet. You ever read through Leviticus what God said about the fats and the sacrifices? He said, don't eat the blood. And he said, and the fat is mine. And what did he want done with it? Burn it up. He didn't want anybody to eat it. Now, he couldn't tell people who were as incredibly ignorant as the children of Israel were after they had been in slavery for 400 years. They had no opportunity for education. They were worked to death. And when God took them out into the wilderness, he began to educate them, and he had to teach them very, very simple things. And so he didn't say, the fat's going to kill you because it's going to clog up your arteries, because they say, what's an artery? The same thing happened to the black people from Africa when they were put into slavery for 400, not 400 years, but, several decades at least in the United States. They weren't stupid people. We gave them an education, and we have some of these people that are smarter than anybody else in the world. But God couldn't speak to people in terms they couldn't understand. So he just said, burn it up. The fat is mine. Do not mess with it. Why? Because he didn't want them to be all dying off of all these things while they're out in the wilderness. Need to talk a little bit about salt. Salt does have something to do with hardening of the arteries. It does have something to do with arthritis. It certainly has a lot to do with ulcers. You know, when I was in college, it was interesting to watch people eat in the cafeteria. They'd all line up, they'd push their little tray through, and the server people would, they'd point to this and they'd go like this, and they'd point to that and they'd go like this. And very interesting communication processes between cafeteria patrons and servers. And they don't speak, they just point and go like this. Or they go like this if it looks terrible. I learned to go like this because they used to make mashed potatoes, except they weren't mashed potatoes. They were all fluffed up parsnips, and they were absolutely atrocious. Nobody could eat them. But they made you think they were mashed potatoes to get you to take them. I guess I could have read the menu and realized they weren't mashed potatoes, but I got fooled a couple of times. But everybody would walk out of the cafeteria line, they'd head over, they'd find a table, they'd sit down, they'd say their blessing, grab the salt shaker and pour it all over everything and eat. And I'd say, aren't you going to taste it first? No, it always needs salt. Well, I didn't think it always needed salt. In fact, most of the time I thought it had too much salt. Distorted vision, destructive to your eyes. High blood pressure, we know salt and hypertension has some direct links. Causes fluid retention. Boy, it's tough on our kidneys and tough on all of our tissues because it causes us to retain so many fluids. Cancer has a lot to do with salt. When we put people on a cancer diet, we take the salt out of it. A friend of ours had an aunt who had been for years fighting and battling with cancer, and she was being very successful. She'd fought it for like 19 years, if I remember correctly, somewhere 15 to 19 by diet alone, and had been winning very well. She got sick with something else, and she went into a hospital, and they stuck a IV in her arm, a saline solution, and this lady was a nurse, and she recognized what was going to happen, and they said her eyes went big like a deer's eyes in the headlights when you're about to hit it, because she couldn't talk, and she knew what was going to happen, and she was dead in 12 hours. She knew what was going to happen. But it does have something to do with cancer and a number of other degenerative disorders. We're told to be the salt of the earth. We're supposed to permeate, and friends, salt does permeate, and it is one of the more deadly things. Sodium chloride is a deadly, poisonous, addicting drug when it's taken out of proportion of how God intended for us to eat it. We do need sodium in our body to have the right electrolyte balance, but we put salt in everything. And the people, if we eat packaged foods, the people who got it before we did put salt in it too. And then we take it out, salt it again. So the average serving gets salted 3 times before it gets eaten. And we develop a taste for salt. And you can also develop a taste for not having salt. I prefer not to have very much salt. Most people consume so much salt that the body can't get the salt out of the system, and it's carried away by the blood deposited throughout the body and tissue fluids in effort to dilute its devastating effects. This is interesting. I think some of you can relate to this. When a person goes on a fast, he can lose as much as 10 pounds or more in just a few days from the excessive body fluids retained in an effort to try and neutralize the salts by solution. Maybe that's why I'm so thin. I don't eat any salt. I could get a little heavier if I just salt, huh? Well, I don't know. If I had 20 gallons of water hanging around, it'd slow me down. I don't think I want to. Average American consumes 125 pounds of sugar a year. Well, somebody else gets my share because I don't eat that much, praise the Lord. 75% of your sugar, and you may say I don't eat any either, comes in hidden foods. You may not be the one who put sugar all over everything, but if you're eating prepared food, somebody else already put it in there for you. Look at all the stuff that it's in. Even in lots of peanut butter. That's another reason to be careful on that peanut butter, Dennis.
Including natural? No.
Some of the natural ones do have it, but by and large, it's more of your fluffy versions like your Skippy and Jif and those types of things. You can taste test the difference on those. When I was in Japan, the only thing I could get was a brand called My peanut butter. I brought it home and the little jar was in the cupboard and I told the kids they couldn't eat it because it was My peanut butter. But we also got, the Skippy Jif things over there. We couldn't get the natural like Adams or some of those other ones. And they were sweet. You didn't need any honey or jelly on those. Frozen vegetables. These cereals. Prepared cereals. I don't know. I guess they put a little grain in there to say there is some. But some of those things they call it King Vitamin. They should call it King Sugar. 500 empty nutrition empty calories a day from sugars, what the average American receives. That's terrible. Does nothing but destroy things. Again, another calcium destructive element. Destroys your B vitamins. And what do you do without B vitamins? Get your nerves all messed up. You also don't fight disease very well. Tough on your immune system. And affects the nerve and brain functions of the body. Boy, you can see that in some kids. You give them sugar. They could have been an angel yesterday, and you give them some sugar, and they turn into a little devil. Of course, it causes obesity, which in turn gives you the hypertension, all these kinds of things. Some people can deal with a little bit of cholesterol, and then you throw a bunch of sugar into the diet, and it overwhelms the system and prevents it from handling what it already had to deal with. Sugar and cancer, I tell you. That's one thing we take out of their diet when they're going to a cancer program is all sugar for various reasons. Tooth decay. When soda pop hit Central America, I had a friend that was working down there and they said everybody's got a soda pop in their mouth down there and none of them have any teeth. And I hope that that's been rectified. I hope the soda pop companies have been kicked out of there because they've really destroyed some areas. Certainly a contributing factor to diabetes. We call it sugar diabetes. It's killing all kinds of people. Hypoglycemia, headache, fatigue, messes up people's thyroid functions, causes depression, poor concentration. We got everybody's depressed around this country. Everybody's on antidepressants. Some people think that there wasn't life before Prozac. Sugar certainly affects your body's ability to fight infections. 50% decrease after you've eaten a significant amount of sugar, and I mean that's a good big old juicy pie. Doesn't take very much sugar. Can of pop, any of those things begin to knock your immune system down. They say that 2 cans of pop knocks your immune system down by 85% for 24 hours. No wonder everybody's dying. Certainly relative to ADD in children. I know I just heard a study on the radio not very long ago who said they just rediscovered that it had nothing to do with it, but boy, you just give it to one of those little fellas and watch him zoom. Be careful of the sugar substitutes as well because many of those have been discovered to be bad for us. People ask me sometimes, can you give me an herb that'll help me to feel better so that I can continue to do myself what I'm doing to myself? And I say, no, I will not do that. Sugar substitutes are the same thing. We still want to be at the wrong type of diet. We need to avoid refined sugars. I just read an article about beet sugar. They're using animal products and it's refining. I'd just soon miss out on that. Coffee, pop, cola, sugar, caffeine, acids, All kinds of things not good for the system. Stay away from this stuff if you want good health. Are you thirsty? Go get some pure water. Maybe some carrot juice might do you good if you're feeling a little draggy. Has all those natural plant sugars that are not refined. Has all those wonderful minerals in there. Maybe that's what your body's hungering for, rather than a can of Pepsi to jolt you along, make you think you're doing better for a little while. You know, those jolting sodas rob your energy of tomorrow and give it to you. You get rob all of it from tomorrow and get half of it today. Well, it doesn't take very long before you're bankrupt of any type of energy. I want to talk about the vitamin B12 myth. You got that on there okay? I have heard this till I am turning green in the gills from nausea. You cannot get vitamin B12 unless you're getting animal sources of food in your diet. And without adequate B12, you're going to have pernicious anemia, and it's going to be the rest of your life. You do not recover from it, and on and on and on and on. The fact is that vitamin B12 is found in many vegetable products. Now, true, it is not as high as what is found in animal products, but our requirements generally are not that high. Our body stores vitamin B12 very well. Someone who ate half a dozen eggs 5 years ago still has probably 2/3 of that still stored up. We store it indefinitely almost. I mean, a long, long time. And if you're continuing to add trace amounts out of any of these types of foods, you're continuing to add as much or more than you're taking away. See, some of the sources are your green beans, your kelp, your seaweed, your soybeans, bananas, tempeh. I'm not sure if I spelled that one right or not. I don't like it, so I can't relate to spelling it. Sunflower seeds, they have to be raw. Bee pollen is a good rich source. Raw peanuts, turnips and the turnip greens, Concord grapes. Raw honey has a trace element. The nutritional yeast is fairly rich in it. Raw wheat germ, not a baked wheat germ. Your phytoplanktons out of the ocean. Irish moss, any of your sea vegetables, dulse, even barley has it. Now, let's talk about one more interesting thing. Self-production. Did you know that you make some yourself? In the morning, you'll have a little bit on your tongue. So if you'll drink whatever you're going to drink in the morning before you brush your teeth with all of your Zap 'em Quick chemicals, which I don't like to do, I like to use other things, you will actually be able to take that and ingest it and get it back into your system because the little bacteria on your tongue make it. But we also have healthy intestinal bacteria as well. And by eating fermentable carbohydrates, any of your grain type products, we are giving enough food for these little healthy bacteria in there to make a good source of vitamin B12 for us. An example here is if we eat 3 ounces of oatmeal and a 3-ounce piece of whole wheat bread, it enables our body to produce enough B12 for 1 day's needs. So let's explode this myth. I asked a physician not long ago, how many cases of pernicious anemia have you seen? And he said, oh boy. Well, yeah, I've seen a few. And he began to think of the people. And I said, were there any vegetarians? And he says, no, not a one. He said, no, they were all meat eaters. And he's been practicing for decades. I didn't make this up. I mean, this comes from a number of sources, and I'm going to quote a couple. Your Natural Lifestyle and Your Health. So Dr. William Kyle is a PhD who wrote that article, and also from that little book, Divine Philosophy of Science and Healing by Gunther Pauling, PhD. These are some of the people who wrote some of these things. And this is not a complete list. You know, as we're going through some of our herbs, we know that some of those herbs had traces of B12, like your white oak bark is the one that comes to the back of my mind. Let's don't believe myths.
All sprouts produce B12.
Yeah, all your sprouts have a B12 in them as well. You know, I could make this list bigger and bigger and bigger if I just would begin to remember things and write them down. And probably I will do that as time goes on. I'll just keep adding to this. The reason I'm talking about nutrition, and I'm going to wrap this up in a little bit here. Everybody's wearing out. I'm beginning to observe a few micro sleeps again, and a few macro sleeps here and there. Not going to name any names or anything, but I'm seeing it. I bet you there's some people at home who had a video running who are over there going on the sofa. If they can stop it and back up to where they were, maybe they can catch up again. The reason I'm sharing this information is for your own personal health and well-being, but I want you to be able to take and share this information with other people in an evangelistic setting. None of this is for selfish reasons, friends. Not one bit of this. I get really tweaked when people come to classes just because they want selfish help so they can go home and cut their medical costs and stay healthier at home, and they won't share it with their relatives or their neighbors, and they won't go hold a class. They won't do it in evangelism. That's shameful. The reason for my sharing this is with you is because you are not a student here today. You're a future teacher. I will not teach students. I only teach teachers. Is that a bargain?
Yes.
Will you all agree to that?
Yes.
Good. Amen. I hear some amens. Okay. I want to help you with some tools. Okay. I didn't create all of this stuff myself. I'm not that brilliant. I got this from sources. And I'm willing to share these sources with you. All of these little cute little things I've been running across there, they're just typeset things. I got many of them out of this Vegetarian Cooking School Cookbook by Modern Manna Ministries. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Recognize any of those? Okay, I just took them down to a print shop, had them blow them up for me, and made projections out of them. I have clear transparencies. These just happen to be the proofs that we made the transparencies off of. You can get most of what I shared with you this morning just out of this little cooking school cookbook. All you need to do is spend $11.95 and you've got probably 2/3 of what I shared with you this morning. You can go down to Kinko's or any of these places yourself and do this. It's easy to get these resources when somebody else has done all the legwork for you to put it together. Now it's in your hands. Run with it. It's like football. The quarterback's done all this work of figuring the play out. He throws the ball, tight end grabs it. All he's got to do is catch it and run. Somebody else has done all the quarterback work for you. Country Life Natural Foods book here. These have got some good resources in them. They've got some good recipes. I think that maybe even some of the things that you folks have been eating here at this school have come from some of these books. Because these were in my box of stuff for nutrition. But because my girls are cooking, I found these in the kitchen. So there's some good recipes in here. I know you all have your own good recipes at home, but I've seen a few of you peeking into some of these things. You're just like all the rest of us. You're always looking for another good recipe, right? So these are good resources. If you want to, get some information on how to get these are very easy to get. I can help you with that. All of these things are very easily found resources. If you're not a computer person and you can't typeset or any of these kinds of things, talk to me and I'll help you get it all typeset and you can have transparencies of your own. And you can either do it this way. Glenn's got this really neat little thing with a video camera here so we can put down pieces of paper and zoom in on them and put them up on our screen. But most of the times when you're going to go to a place and you want to give a cooking school or a lecture, what you're going to have to rely on is an overhead projector. Unless you're rich and you have lots of money for multimedia things. But most of the times you can rent an overhead projector from the place that you're holding your class. If you're going to have it in a room at a bank, most of the banks have them. Most of the public libraries will rent you a room with the overhead projector. Many of the high schools and elementary schools and middle schools will rent you a room with an overhead projector. It's like $5 extra, whatever. It's very easy to do this when you've got some good visual aids. Now, true, you do need to do some study on nutrition so that you know what some of these things mean. It's one thing for you to just look at those, but even if you didn't know anything, you could just read this stuff. That was some of what I just got done doing. I read some of this to you, and yeah, I knew some extra interesting things to help expand it. But take the video, go home and learn exactly what I just said to you. Go get some books, get on the internet, do some things, get some personalized information in your mind. It makes it more interesting, it makes it more genuine, it's more you. But any and every one of you can do this. And if you do a presentation like this, I guarantee your cooking school is going to have a lot of interest. You're going to motivate people to want to know something better. I started out with a program one time, was on a totally different related topic. We went into talking about animal diseases, and at the end of the program, I could see that these people were having some very strong looks of concern on their faces. And I said, "Are you worried about what you're going to make for breakfast in the morning?" And all of those ladies said, "Uh-huh," a face lit up. They were really worried. And I said, "Would you want us to have somebody who really understands how to make really tasty, nutritious food without any of these dangerous things in it? Would you like me to get somebody to help you with this?" It's kind of like Miriam saying, "How'd you like a nurse for your baby?" to Pharaoh's daughter. Well, of course they said, "Yes." We had a cooking school. We didn't even have to advertise this thing. We made a lot of friends for the Kingdom of Heaven out of that program. A lot of these people are really good friends of many of the church members who worked there. I want to encourage you to take this little arrow and put it in your quiver and go out and be part of the great controversy in a realistic way. Let's close this with a prayer. Lord, we're grateful for all of this information that has fallen into our lap. And Father, help us not to fumble this ball, but to carry it forward and to score a lot of points for the kingdom of heaven, Lord, because there's a lot of people out there who are going to lose their life if we don't. And we're grateful that you care enough to make this information available to us. And we're grateful that you have given us a sense of concern. We ask this day that you will help each one of us to be just stewards of the information that you have placed within our grasp. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.